Hello again everybody. So today we're gonna make a recipe for salsa al pomodoro or tomato sauce. Tomato sauce is the most famous sauce in the whole world. And here in Italy it gets made pretty much all over, but I would say that in the region of Campania, where Naples is, it's where it gets made the most, which is why most times it's also known as pumarola. To make this recipe, we've got some very basic ingredients. We're gonna make a basic pomarola sauce, a basic tomato sauce. But then again, people make it in different ways. Sometimes they add carrots to it to make it sweeter. Sometimes they add all different sorts of herbs like oregano or rosemary. Well, I'm just gonna show you a very basic way to make it. And then obviously, you take this recipe and twist it whichever way you prefer. To make this recipe today, I'm gonna use some fresh cherry tomatoes, some chopped onions, some fresh basil, 1 little clove of garlic, and some passata di pomodoro sauce. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna do, I've got my pan on pretty, medium-high heat. I'm gonna add some vegetable oil to it. And I'm gonna start frying off my onions. Okay, I'm gonna fry them off with a few leaves of my basil. So basil, you wanna divide it in two, yeah? You're gonna put a little bit at the start so the flavors can infuse in the whole sauce, and then the rest of it you will add at the end. Once the sauce will be cooked, you put it back in and you let it infuse a little longer. So you get a little, a bit of a mixture between cooked and fresh basil through it, which is gonna make it really nice, yeah? So I'm just gently frying my onions here. I don't want them to color too much, so I'm gonna keep my heat to sort of medium high. I'm gonna add a pinch of salt, and I'm just gonna turn this down. After I've sweat off my onions a little bit, I'm gonna add my clove of garlic, yeah? Okay, so now as my onions are cooking, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna chop my fresh tomatoes. These are going to cook for a very long time, so it doesn't really matter how fine you chop them. Actually, the rougher you chop them, the better, You want this to be quite rustic, not too precise, because once the sauce will be cooked, we're gonna go and we're gonna pass it through a fine strainers, so we're going to be able to get rid of all the tiny pips inside the tomato and get a nice, fine, pure tomato sauce. So obviously, as you chop your tomatoes, keep an eye on your onions. You don't want them to burn. Give them a little stir every now and then. Today here, I'm using cherry tomatoes, but you can use any type of tomato to make this tomato sauce, Very good way is to use different varieties of tomatoes so you get, different flavors coming through. Cherry tomatoes are the sweetest ones, generally, so that's why I'm using them today. Once I've finished cutting my tomatoes, I'm gonna go and I'm going to add them to my sauce. Give this a little mix. Okay, so now that my tomatoes and onions have caramelized a bit, I'm ready to go in with my passata. So I'm using passata di pomodoro today, but you can use tin chopped tomatoes if you want, tin peeled tomatoes if you want. It's your choice. Okay, so now what I've done is I've turned up the heat, and once it starts bubbling, then I turn it right down, and you want to keep this cooking at a minimum temperature for the longest you can. Now what I'm going to say to you is the traditional recipe will only want fresh tomatoes. The reason why we made and invented this sauce is because there is a very large abundance of beautiful, super sweet tomatoes in southern Italy. In order to be able to store them for a longer period of time, we'd cook them and then put them in jars and sort of keep them for a very long time as a sauce. Now that you know how the original recipe should be, I'm going to tell you that the reason why today I'm not just using fresh tomatoes is because I gather that depending on where you're going to be in the world watching these videos, as you're going to try and replicate this recipe, it may be slightly hard to find good quality fresh tomatoes, whereas it's pretty much always going to be quite easy to find a good quality tin chopped tomato or passata as today, because we still produce it in Italy and then ship it all across the world, so you can have fresh Italian tomato, sorry, not fresh Italian tomatoes, you can have the Italian tomato taste anywhere you are, but obviously the tomatoes are gonna have to be processed in some sort of way. So here you have a sort of a mix between fresh and not fresh, tinned or bottled, whichever it is, so you can pretty much get a good end product with a good quality and some Italian taste, no matter where you are in the world. Okay, so as I was saying to you before, now that my sauce is bubbling and I've put it down, I've lowered down the temperature to a minimum, I'm gonna let this cook for probably a good 2 hours. If you're gonna replicate this in the same exact way, then yes, give it, an hour and a half, 2 hours to cook. If you're gonna use different ingredients, if you're gonna use, only fresh tomatoes, it may need a little longer. If you use chopped tomatoes or tinned peeled tomatoes, maybe a little longer. I'm not sure what it's gonna be like at your home when you're gonna replicate this. Just keep tasting it, taste it until it's sweet and taste it until all the acidity from the tomatoes has disappeared. Okay, so I'm gonna see you back in 2 hours. Okay, so our sauce has been cooking now for about an hour. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna add just a small pinch of sugar, yeah? Now, I'm using cherry tomatoes, which are really sweet naturally as they are. And as I said to you, different varieties of tomatoes will add or, take away sweetness to your sauce. So it's always nice to sort of balance out the saltiness and the complexity of the umami taste present in the tomatoes with a touch more sugar. Yeah, it's just gonna make it a little sweeter and just a little nicer. So I've added my sugar, I'm mixing it through, and I'm gonna let this cook for a further hour. So our sauce has cooked for 2 hours and I've just switched off the heat. So we're gonna move on to our next stage now. This stage is not compulsory. You don't have to do it. If you want a sort of, a more sort of rough tomato sauce, you can keep it as is, yeah? Just, put it away, store it in a container, store it into glass jars and then boil them so they can keep for very long. Otherwise, we are going to pass it through this sieve and we're gonna get rid of all the pips. So the pips will sort of maintain their acidity, yeah? And also, as you eat through pomodoro pasta or whatever else you're gonna use this for, you'll have the pip going through your mouth and you're gonna bite into it and that's gonna release acidity, and so it's not gonna be very comfortable for your mouth, but also in terms of taste, it's just gonna make it more acidic. So I prefer to pass mine through the sieve, get rid of all the pips, get rid of all the skins as well from the tomatoes, and just get a nice sort of, pure tomato sauce. So this is very easy, little by little, you just kind of, put some sauce in your sieve and just press it. Yeah. So you're pressing this down, you can see it's passing through. Yeah. So all your big bits, all your chunks, all your skins, all your pips from the tomatoes will not go through. And you're just gonna get a finer sauce, sort of more refined, more pure. Okay, so now I'm just gonna show you, you can go with your spoon and scrape the bottom of the strainer to get that sauce. So I'm just gonna show you something here. You've got a nice smooth paste of tomato sauce, which is pure, and all my pips, all my skins are staying inside the sieve, yeah? So you can see why I'm showing you this process. And then obviously it's up to you to decide whether you want to use it or not. I just kind of like to show you this way. Okay, so this is the time where you're gonna add your second half of the fresh basil that we had initially, yeah? And so you're just mixing this through. So you will have some leaves of fresh basil through your sauce. And it's just gonna give it a fresher sort of floral taste and flavor, yeah? So just mix these through, and then, as I said, again, you know, store this whichever way you prefer. You can put it into ice molds and freeze it like so. So then when you go and sort of take it out, you can take out little cubes and you can take out as much as you want. Put it in a container, store it in a container in your fridge. Or if you put it into glass jars and then boil the jars, you're kind of vacuum packing it. You're getting rid of all the air and pasteurizing it. You're gonna allow the sauce to keep to up to 3, 4, 5, 6 months at room temperature. And this is kind of what we do here in Italy. You know, by sort of the end of the summer, when the tomatoes are just at the right time, just ripe enough, people go and buy, you know, 2 cases of them, make lots of tomato sauce, put it into jars, boil the jars, and store the jars for the rest of the year. So this is our salsa al pomodoro or pomarola from Italy.